think about it and see whether your judgment of this person is actually, valid. Are you judging this person and thinking they're a good person just because they're good looking, or just because they have money, or they're super famous? Because that happens a lot. That happens a lot, and it's not always accurate, and probably most times not, right? Hey y'all, it's Nita. Welcome to those who Hello, hey, welcome to Be Centric TV. Welcome to those who are joining us for the very first time, and thank you for those who are returning. If you have not already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Please be sure to subscribe. Come on, let's get this channel growing and going. So today we're going to talk about cognitive bias, more specifically the halo effect, and how it works within representation, more specifically Black representation in media, beauty, and different things like that, right? And how we must be aware and acknowledge that bias that we do have, because all of us have it, we all experience it, and we're going to continue to experience it. But there are ways and there are things that we can do and to minimize it and or to recognize it, because there are times that you're going to need to use that bias, especially when you got to make certain decisions quickly. But here we are in 2023, and we as Black people are still under and misrepresented, whether it's in the media, entertainment, beauty, fashion industry, or even the 9-to-5 workforce, right? So in the music and television industry, there's been an overrepresentation of us being thugs, hookers, and hoes. And in the beauty and fashion industry, when being Black, it's typically considered defying beauty standards instead of our beauty just being included in the standard, right? So we are so underrepresented that, in my opinion, we may be just a little bit over ecstatic about, this new brown skin mythical creature under the sea. That's just my opinion, right? And if you've ever worked in like corporate America, or even walked through a building of corporate America, I don't need to say no more about that, right? So representation is important. It's important because it can help reduce misrepresentation and also tokenism. We all know those, well, it didn't happen to me, or I'm Black and I'm successful, or I'm dark skinned and I made it through, or I grew up poor and this, that, and the third, and I'm successful. So basically those narrow-minded individuals that cannot see past their own anecdotal experiences. So representation, it creates opportunity, and it can be a confidence booster for those who are typically marginalized. Many of the representations that we do see are typically a result of some of our cognitive bias. So what is cognitive bias? Cognitive bias is a systematic thought process caused by the tendency of human brain to simplify information processing through a filter of personal experiences and preferences. So cognitive bias can help humans, find little shortcuts and ways to access and navigate throughout daily life, but it's often causes error in the thought process, right? The thing about it, many people are not conscious of their bias, and in most cases when they're making decisions, their biases aren't necessarily always intentional. In some cases it is intentional, but in a lot of cases it's not intentional. Now, over the past 60 years, there has been, a continually evolving list of different type of cognitive biases, but one of the most common ones is the halo effect. So the halo effect, I do talk about this briefly in my Pretty Privileged video. You all can check that out. I'll leave the link in the description, my bad. And the thumbnail I might leave here so you can know which one to look at. So the halo effect is, it occurs when an initial positive judgment about a person unconsciously colors the perception of the individual as a whole. It causes people to be biased in their judgments by transferring their feelings about one attribute of something to another that's typically unrelated. So take for example, this cognitive bias allows people to look past Beyonce's Oscar after party dress, but condemn Sierra for hers. And while both of their husbands seems to be okay with their titties and ass being out from time to time, people dare not call Jay-Z the simp that they call Russell, right? And speaking of Beyonce and Jay-Z, this cognitive bias also allows people to feel that they are above critique and that they're good, trustworthy people. Also, this bias attempts to allow people to correlate talent with money. You know, we see it often. We see where someone might be critiquing a certain rapper or singer or actor about whatever their talents are, and then under the comments, you see a plethora of people talking about, well, y'all just haters. They're still getting money. They got money. What does them having money has to do with their talent or lack thereof? Like the two don't even correlate. So those people are using their bias and their love or whatever it is that they like about that person and the money that they have to somehow correlate those talents, and somehow it's okay for them to be talentless or whatever it is, right? So this cognitive bias is expressed quite often, especially when we're talking about popular culture and beauty industry. Also, this bias allows for casting of a lighter skinned woman for a role that should be, or specifically for a dark skinned woman, right? And we'll get into that more of that later. You know, even down to dating, like you have, you know, this whole, what is it? High value you have this whole high value man thing, and you know, just because someone is a nerd, just because someone is well dressed, just because someone is well put together does not equate to them being a good man. That's just not how it works, right? But some people will think, oh, I dress nice, I make a lot of money, I'm smart, and somehow that makes you a good man or a good person. That does not necessarily, right? So the halo effect is most prevalent, but it's not limited to when we're speaking of attractiveness, financial wealth, and clout, right? So I don't know what it is, but a lot of people out here are just taking issue with Sierra and Russell Wilson's marriage. Whatever it is, people cognitive bias is why they can tolerate Beyonce's attire over Sierra and not criticize Jay-Z's position as a husband. Like I stated before, people are not typically conscious of this bias, and people like Beyonce and Jay-Z, they hold a lot of clout, and they're a lot of people's fave, and because of that, so those people subconsciously ignore or find ways to defend their behavior, no matter how similar it is to their not so faves. Their clout, their financial wealth, beauty, talent, whatever it is, leads people to assume that regardless of whatever it is that they may have done wrong or how they may have negatively affected people, that they can do no wrong because they got money. They got money, and she is the best thing, you know, since sliced bread or whatnot. You know, we see this all the time. You know, anyone who critiques Beyonce, Queen Bee, baby, them honey bees are not so sweet. You know, their feelings about Beyonce's talent, you know, as a great artist typically clouds their judgment and makes them assume that she's also a great person. And the same is for Jay-Z. Now, here's the thing. I am not here to debate whether they are good people or not. I don't know them people from a can of paint. This is just an example of how you can recognize people's bias and the halo effect. And it's just a way to make people understand. But I will tell you this. I don't believe that anyone becomes a billionaire without stepping on some toes, what you got to do from time to time in business, and stepping over somebody's. Now, you can take that figuratively or literally. Take it how you want it, right? All right, so this is how cognitive bias affects representation. Now, there are so many instances where we can call out poor casting in Hollywood, right? But for the sake of contemporary relevancy, I'm going to speak up on the up-and-coming musical movie adaptation of the 1985 movie The Color Purple, which is based on the 1982 released novel that was written by Alice Walker, right? So in the original movie and in the novel, the character Nettie, who is the younger sister of Celie, is depicted as having dark skin. Now, for some, it may be like, well, that doesn't matter. But in the book, especially in the book, that was very relevant and intentional, right? But for this musical movie adaptation, Halle Bailey is playing Nettie. Now, y'all know Halle Bailey is our new uh, Little Mermaid. She's also half of the duo group Chloe and Halle, right? And Halle is of a lighter brown skin complexion. Now, here's the thing. I'm actually not opposed to her playing the character. I like Halle, and I think she is up and coming. I think she's a beautiful young woman, and it's something about her that I do like. Now, although I'm not opposed, I very much do understand why some people would take issue with her being casted as Nettie. Now, with me not really being opposed, I recognize that that's my bias. You see how that work? I recognize it's a bias because I like her. I think she's a good actress and I think she would do a good job in the role. However, I do know deep down inside that role should have went to a dark-skinned woman because of the significance that it holds in the story and that time period, right? So I believe Halle's casting comes from a place of bias, the halo effect more specifically. And the reason being is that because this character, Nettie, I believe that it's easier for people to accept a lighter skinned woman being considered attractive. And there's a femininity factor that goes in with that as well. Femininity is typically associated with lighter skin. And that's I've talked about this even for men and for women. Now, is that necessarily true? Of course not. You know, dark skinned women can be just as feminine, but in society, that's how it's portrayed. Now, based on the story, and the character of Nettie, Nettie is attractive, Nettie is educated, Nettie is intelligent, and most of those attributes are typically associated with lighter skin, especially in those days, especially in the days that this movie is based in. So please try not to look at it in your own lens in your own life, because I know some people will be like, well, no, they look at light skinned people as bimbos and all this and that and third. Listen, historically, lighter skinned people have been considered more intelligent, and they typically had the better education and different things like that. So I think this casting, they may have felt it would be easier for people to correlate that and understand that versus having another dark, like they did in the movie, having another dark skinned woman and looking at her as, attractive. They may feel like maybe if they cast it, I don't know if this is what they felt, but I feel like possibly if they cast another dark skinned woman, she could be too close to the attractiveness of Fantasia. So in their eyes, maybe it's easier to see this lighter skinned woman be that character, right? And the color purple is very intentional, and of course it's from a novel, so when you're reading a novel, they have to be very descriptive. And if I'm not mistaken, everyone from the original movie was pretty much to the T of how it was in the book, if I'm not mistaken, right? So mostly all the main characters are dark skinned, with the exception of Squeak. Now, Squeak in the book is a light-skinned woman. Not only is she light-skinned, she's biracial. And that is actually very significant in the book. In the movie, the 1985 movie, they didn't really get into that. They didn't make her characters big, but her just looking like how she is described in the book really spoke if you really paid attention. Her being light-skinned and also being biracial looking. The actress that played her, Rae Dawn Chong, is a multiracial black woman, right? I actually, looked up at her, and her dad is actually Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong. Fun fact, right? So in the musical adaptation that's going to be coming out in December, her is cast as Squeak. Now, when I initially saw the casting, I didn't think nothing of it. I was like, okay, I like her. She's good. This be something good for her or whatnot. But then when I read part of the book, I started to think maybe her shouldn't have been casted for this, because in the book, it is very intentional that Squeak be a high yellow woman, a high yellow biracial woman. Now, her is biracial, but to me, her is brown skin. She's not light skin in my eyes. She is biracial. She has the hair, maybe some of the phenotype aesthetics, but her complexion does not fit what that character is. And now, granted, this is a musical adaptation, so it's probably not going to get into depth of her character, but based on her character in the book, I think someone who is of light skin, high yellow, biracial should have been casted. But, that's my opinion, because I feel like it holds a lot of significance. Her complexion in the book held a lot of significance, based on some of the things that happened to her. I have not read the whole book completely, but I read certain parts of it, and I was like, oh, yeah, they probably should have, not taking anything from her, because I do like her, but I don't know. Is it me? Because I don't look at her as light skinned. She's just not light skinned to me. So y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments. So here is where I do think The Color Purple kind of dropped the ball, because I think this was a moment that they could focus on featureism. A lot of times we do focus on colorism, and colorism is definitely a thing for those that don't believe, but featureism too. Featureism is too. So having and casting a dark-skinned person as Nettie would have been a lot better for people to understand that privilege is just not a one-all. Now, I talk about that in a previous video, colorism and dark-skin privilege. Go check that out. I'll put the link in the description for you. So it's not a one-all. You can be a little bit more privileged as a dark-skinned woman than another dark-skinned woman, right? Because think about it. When we mention beautiful dark-skinned women in beauty or either in the entertainment industry, we're typically naming the same people. And when we name those people, if you notice, most of them have very narrow features, right? They clearly are black. They look like black women, but they tend to have a narrow nose, or either they got their nose done to look narrow. Lips might be a little full, but not too full, just enough that they are a bit more palatable to the masses, right? There's levels to this. Their privilege is not a one size fits all. So I do think, deep down, yes, they should have casted a dark-skinned woman for Nettie, but like I said, I'm really not opposed to Halle, because I understand where their mind was coming from. That doesn't make it right, but I understand where their mind was coming from. I think it'd be easier for the masses to associate pretty with a lighter skinned complected woman. So that's a lot of how the halo effect can work in representation and how it's expressed in representation. Now, the halo effect bias does work in reverse, and it's called the horns effect. The horns effect happens when we ascribe negative attributes or behaviors to someone based on one aspect of their appearance or character. Now, the horns effect is extremely dangerous. It's a lot of the reason that many black men are unalived by the police. Black women too, but definitely more specifically black men. This bias also, allows people to assume a woman is promiscuous based on how she dresses. They look at her, she might not be dressed conservative, she might be showing a little bit more than they used to, so they assume that she's a hoe, right? So this bias also assumes that, a light-skinned man is less masculine. Now, for a man, that would be more of an insult and a negative thing, because regardless of a man's complexion, most men want to be viewed as a masculine man, right? And they feel they are a masculine man, and it could be very dangerous and to always associate light-skinned men as being soft, right? It's not cool, because a lot of them internalize that and become hyper masculine. And it caused them to make poor decisions. It caused them to be aggressive. And it could cause them to sometimes get themselves unalived. So that can be an extreme, but it's definitely real, right? And also for dark-skinned men, dark-skinned men typically have higher higher prison sentences. They are more likely to be sentenced to prison, and they're looked at as more aggressive. They're looked at as hyper masculine, and a lot of times dangerous. And so that bias affects them very negatively. So we have to be mindful that, not to also practice the horns effect. Yes, sometimes your initial thought of a person based on them can be accurate, but we know good as well that that's not always true. All right, so here is how we can avoid or at least recognize our biases, right? Whether it's the halo effect or whether it's the horns effect or any other kind of cognitive bias that we, all experience. And we're all going to experience it. We're going to continue to experience them. But it's best when you can recognize it, because then you can make better choices. There are going to be times you're going to have to make snap judgments of people. You're not going to always have time to sit back and slow down your reasoning process. There are going to be those times. But in most cases, we can take the time to slow down, think about it, and see whether your judgment of this person is actually, valid. Are you judging this person and thinking they're a good person just because they're good looking, or just because they have money, or they're super famous? Because that happens a lot. And it's not always accurate, and probably most times not, right? When you're reading something, instead of just making a judgment off of that headline, maybe you should take the time to actually read caption. And maybe you should actually take the time to watch full videos. That way you can get a full perspective of what that person is saying and what they're trying to convey. Take your time in your reasoning process. Everything doesn't have to happen super fast. In the times that your choices have to be super fast, just pray that you just made the correct decision, right? So understand that this bias exists will help with your decision making. Sometimes you have to stop and think, hey, am I being biased when I'm making this decision? Let me add this in real quick. I forgot to say this during the video, but checking yourself regarding your biases will also assist with the advancement of society by creating spaces for true diversity. With diversity, we can gain authentic representation in media, entertainment, the beauty industry, and the workforce. People will start to assess and look past their biases and possibly stop portraying stereotypical attributes of Black characters based on what society perceives them to be. Black men can stop being looked at as a threat to society. Now, although we all want it and need it to survive, it's imperative that we stop associating wealth with good character. Be aware of the horns effect. It is very dangerous. Please don't always assume negative things on people just because of how they look. I think we should know that, but it still happens. And like I said, everyone does it from time to time. Just because someone isn't dressed the way you think they should dress or look the way you think they should look does not automatically make them, a menace to society, right? Both extremes of the halo effect and the horns effect is detrimental. Find balance. Think about your thoughts. Slow it down. Try your best to not be overly biased, right? That's all I have for you all right now. Let me know your experience with cognitive bias and the halo effect, how it affects you. What do you think about the video? Let me know your thoughts below in the comment section. Be sure to like this video, be sure to share this video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you got this far, you may as well subscribe and watch another video. They'll be right here. So go ahead and subscribe below. Watch another video. Until next time, be beautiful, be Black, be black.